Officers and friends, welcome to this extraordinary Zoom meeting in these extraordinary times. Thank you for your Captain Malcolm for taking this opportunity to bring us such an inspirational message. The HQ group are well and continue to work on your behalf. I can only speak for myself. Travel has been limited and my bubble is extremely limited. Here in Collingwood, we appear to be safe from the COVID, but I'm not taking any chances. Stay safe. God bless the regiment. And I'll now turn it back to Major Bolton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colonel. So at this point, headquarters has the distinct pleasure of inviting the Padre of the York Garrison to speak to the entire regiment. I note that the Padre from Quebec City, Catherine, is supposed to be on the line as well, but I haven't seen her yet. So we have representation from basically across the country. Just as a way of introduction, Malcolm Sinclair is an ordained minister in the United Church of Canada. He retired 48 years ago. Catherine is here. He retired after 48 years of ministry. For the last 30 years, he was the preacher at the historic Metropolitan United Church in downtown Toronto. Over the years, he has preached across Canada and in places as diverse as Scotland, Barbados, Bermuda, and Australia. He and his wife, Milady Elspeth, are living at their summer home on the Bay of Quinte during the pandemic.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And as our Prime Minister said to us every morning, bonjour tout le monde. It is my privilege to be here with all of you today and to speak to this great regiment across the country. Since I am a Padre, I reworked a simple biblical phrase, and with that, I begin. If anyone gives so much as a cup of cold water to one of these my soldiers, there shall be a reward. So in this time when a nation and a world are thirsty, if this opportunity together gives each of us a cup of cold water, there shall surely be a reward in it. I need to tell you that I was never much of a joiner. I'm an only child, and the first 5 years of school was a nightmare to me. I would run home at recess hoping it was noon, and I'd run home at noon hoping it was the beginning of summer holidays, and it never was. And I would spend my evenings peering out through the windows of the Venetian blinds on the second floor, hoping I didn't have to go out into the big world. No teams for me, just time spent basically alone. But everybody has a Simon Fraser in his life, and a Simon Fraser is one who comes along and taps you on the shoulder at some point and says, come with me, I have an adventure for you, something you never thought of before. I was, for years, as well as being a minister, an entertainer, and I think I am an entertainer at heart. And so for 43 years, I found myself entertaining at Burns suppers and Scottish concerts all over Ontario and in various parts of Canada, as it turned out. And for 20 years, I was responsible for the Burns supper at the Old Mill restaurant in the West End of Toronto, a very big event, 300 or 400 people with all the Burns trimmings. And the 48th Highlanders of Canada would bring their pipes and drums and pipe in the haggis, and Warrant Officer George Walker would toast it in his inimitable fashion. And I used to watch those who were carrying the hod. They were a very interesting looking group of men with their scarlets and their bare hackle bonnets and their red and white checkered socks. And at the end of each year, I would think, who are they? And at the end of each year, they would think, who is he? And then a few years later, the Simon Fraser in us called, and Colonel Anderson, who was our officer commanding at that point, phoned along with Lieutenant Colonel Clark and said, could we take you for lunch one day? And they took me for lunch and said, would you consider being our Padre? Our Padre is retiring and we thought of you. And I became their Padre, and all of a sudden I began to realize how wonderful It is. Over the years, I have enjoyed the friendship and the fellowship and the discipline and the honor of being a 78 Fraser Highlander. I've even involved myself to some extent, as some of my garrison people will know, in the business of becoming an honorable guard, the idea of wearing that gorget. Now, over the years, I've passed the written test, but I'll tell you that it's the drills that get to me, the foot drill and the sword drill. I think I have most of them, but the 8-point spontoon salute is still trouble. I can do 7 of the points, but by the time I get to the 8th point, I've jabbed my neighbor in the ribs and he doesn't like it much. So I'm still working on that 8th point. To be a Fraser Highlander is to have a place of honor in the history of North America, because we remember in ourselves the flesh and blood men of women who came with courage, with a capital C, many years ago to this new land and made it in many ways what it is today. To be a Fraser Highlander is to uphold the values of the military, discipline and tenacity and support to the comrades, and the defense of country and great civil values. It is to honor the fallen among ourselves and the fallen in our enemies, and we do that. At our ceremony of honors in York Garrison, we remember all the regimental battles by lighting a candle and giving a synopsis of each one. And then we pledge allegiance to the monarch and our cooperation and support to each other. And then we march out the door with flags flying and pipes playing across the front of the church lawn. And then our musket squad gathers and fires 2 or 3 rounds at St. Michael's Hospital across the road, right to the heart unit. It's a memorable event. I'm grateful to Lieutenant Colonel Bolton for giving me this opportunity. And as I was considering the remarks today, I was asking myself, where are we these days in the long history of the 78 Fraser Highlanders? And I thought, we're not at the historical beginnings. This is not 11 years after the Battle of Culloden. Simon Fraser is not standing among us in person. He has not gone to the Prime Minister and to the King and suggested Highlanders as soldiers. He has not come to talk us through our resentments at having the Battle of Culloden around us and gathering us 1,500 in number to go and fight for the British. The French-English War had been a long war at that point, and the North American field of battle was the least popular. Indeed, soldiers in those days, so I was reading, were looked upon as rather ruffians and not worth very much. Indeed, our own commanding officer, General James Wolfe, said, if we fall, it's no great mischief. We aren't there now. This is not Inverness in 1757. Nor are we in the ice-choked bay before the great fortress of Louisbourg, with bullets flying and men packed tightly in wooden boats and their plaids pushed down into the bullet holes, lest the boats sink into the icy water. We're not terrified in an onslaught or exuberant in a moment of victory or bereft at the loss of clansmen and friends who have died around us. Nor are we at the foot of those steep cliffs at the Promenade de Québec on the evening of September the 13th, 1759, where 46 men climbed the rock face, and in the morning, 1,500 of our troops stood in the field, ready to face the French. The season for battle was growing short. The enemy, we heard, was on the move, and resources for us were far away down the river. The time was now. We did not realize as soldiers that General Wolfe had been a very sick man. He had been suffering lately from rheumatism and fever, that he had also premonitions about dying in the battle and had said to someone he would rather die on the battlefield than face a loss and have to face the people at home. Well, he chose the cliffs, I read somewhere, to spite his generals with whom he had disagreements. He would show them by going up the most unlikely place. Well, we called out Montcalm. The battle was fierce. At the end, both commanders were dead, but it wasn't over. A few short months later, the French counterattacked, and our regiment was savaged during the attack. And then winter set in hard, and the days were long and demanding. And yet we were helped along the way, so I read. Local habitants were generous to us. Britain in 1759 declared the year Annus Mirabilis, the year of the miracle, since we had won the Battle of Quebec. And Quakers as far away as Staffordshire had knitted and woven grey cloth in such great numbers that 1,500 of us were able to be supplied with trews and greatcoats for the winter in Canada. And nuns in Quebec sewed them so we could wear them. We went on to victories in Montreal and St. John's, but that was then. Disbanded in 1763 at the end of hostilities, over 300 stayed on in Quebec to settle in Canada, and as I said, to make it as it is today. And many later volunteered to fight for the British in the American Revolution. Well, that's our past history, but where are we now? I was thinking that we are perhaps in the winter we spent in upper New York State. Do you remember reading about that one? Snow and storms out of season, the threat of illness, the rise of need, a feeling of being isolated during a global pandemic seems to fit it, missing the fellowship of each other, the world around us full of cold spells and a winter that seems never to end. Is that where we are these days? Well, what to do? I was rereading General Wolfe's orders to the regiment before embarking upriver to tackle Quebec, and three things stood out. The first one was the importance of nourishment. This is the order. As the regiments arrive, they are to have fresh beef delivered to them, and in general, while the troops remain in this harbor, they are to be furnished with as much provision as can be procured. The regiments and corps are to be provided with fish lines and hooks. In this winter of forced waiting, take nourishment, 78 Frasers, for your mind and your body and your spirit. Read the books that please you, watch the programming that pleases you, phone your friends, wear masks and keep social distance and wash your hands and phone your friends and keep on top of world events for sure. We're not becoming little moles in a hole, and go easy on the booze. That's a note to self, by the way. We're all soldiers and we're on duty still, even in the dullness of winter. Well, the second thing that stood out in Wolfe's orders was the theme of armaments. This is what the order says. Besides the 30 rounds of ammunition, which each soldier is to be provided a quantity of cartridges in casks, others are to be put aboard the transports. The regiment will be careful to try the ammunition as it's delivered to them, that they may be sure it fits their arms. It is particularly necessary for the service of this campaign that the regiment be provided with a very large stock of shoes before they sail, as any supply hereafter will be very uncertain. Hospital ships will secure every man that may fall ill on the voyage. So the message, arm yourselves, polish your strengths. So how's your footwear these days? How is the sturdiness of your footwear for the terrain on which we're walking? Have you still got your wit and your charm? I already heard some of it as we gathered for this broadcast. And your intelligence and your experience and your wisdom. I love to dress up and to become a 78th Fraser. And whenever I get an opportunity, I tell people that I am a 78th Fraser. We were touring the Plains of Abraham one day on a tour bus. And as we passed the place where General James Wolfe died, I said to the tour guide, I'm a 78th Fraser Highlander. Well, I wasn't sure they were going to eject me off the bus or not, but I stayed for the whole ride and was very proud of my designation. My family and I go every year on Canada Day to the little village of Bath near Kingston on Lake Ontario. And in the year of 2012, the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, a group of Americans were landing that afternoon in costume and were going to be repelled by the local citizenry. Well, they came ashore, shots were fired, there were dead lying all over the field, and suddenly a group of women in costume went out to pick through the uniforms. My wife thought it was a garage sale and she joined them. She had to be physically hauled off, but we got a few nice items. I was very proud to be a soldier in those days. As a matter of fact, I went into one of the tents that was selling things, and I bought a Scottish officer's pistol, a replica, one of those silver ones from the 18th century. And I came out of the tent waving the thing over my head and showing my grandchildren, and walking by the Ontario Provincial Police car, waving my pistol over my head. I was told months later by one of our garrison members that we're not allowed to carry those things. We're not even allowed to show them, even though they're replicas. And I dodged a bullet on that day. But I have it in a drawer. But I still remember with pride the day that our musket men go out onto that field, and I listen to the orders given. Load, fire, aim, 78th Frasers, boom! And I feel the pride going through me. Check your ammunition. Well, the third highlight in the orders is a one that I simply sensed among the words. It's inspiration, really. Remember who you are. You are to fight with courage and serve with loyalty and contribute with enthusiasm and take no sauce and no taunts from the enemy. We wrap the body of our General James Wolfe in our tartan, and to this day, we still wrap each other in our colors. That is vital. So I began with reworking a biblical quote about the simple gift of a cup of water. And I want to tell you a story about a cup of water. I had a great friend in the United Church, a great minister friend and a mentor to me, who died in his late 90s a few years ago. His name was Richard Davidson, a very great church builder and fine preacher. And in the Second World War, he was a padre at RAF Wick in Scotland. He gave me his communion kit, a little package with the chalice and the paten and the cloths in a leather case that said RAF Captain Davidson on it. And I have it as one of my treasures. He told me that when the flights were coming back from Europe, some men missing, some wounded, the flights would land at Wick, and Dr. Davidson would open the box and put it on empty ammunition boxes with a cloth over it. And he would feed the men the bread and wine of the sacrament, the cup of water given for thee, as they stepped down from the plane, shaken and remembering those whom they had won and those whom they had lost. A great gift, and I treasured it. And when I was in Wick, Scotland a few years ago and went into a little museum there, they're all very small buildings there, I spoke to the man and told him the story of the communion set. And he said, I have to tell somebody about this. And he telephoned to someone at the local Wick paper. And 10 minutes later, down the street came a man running with a pad in one hand and a pencil in the other, and said, I want every single detail about your story, every single detail about the Padre. Even years later, in the little village of Wick, a cup of water given, a cup of courage given, a memory given, still carried great, great weight. Well, there's another part which is hinted below the surface in these orders, and it's about real life as it is. And this is it. The regiments are to receive provisions for no more than 3 women per company of 70 and 4 women for company of 100. Aha, the women, the place of women. Of course, in those days, women had a relatively low social standing, as did soldiers. So a woman married to a soldier had a low social standing indeed. And yet there were women in the camps, and official women in the camps, who went with the regiment to the new land. And they were historically seen as very, very helpful in terms of nursing and cooking and sewing and caring and listening and speaking and leading and fighting side by side on occasion with the men around them. The gift of women humanized the regiment and the times, and we still remember their gift with much appreciation. Well, the other part of it is simply to have fun, and we do that. Not only are we serious in our historical recollection, but we like to have fun together, and those regimental dinners and those dine-ins that we share are memorable indeed, highlights for me. And we always have the haggis, and we always have the roast beef. And I was thinking of one that was sort of mirror a Burns supper with the address to the haggis, only this could be held any time of the year, and it would involve something called the Padre's pudding. Well, I'm just making this up. We'd have the Padre's pudding, a sweet kind of dish in the middle, and I took the liberty of writing something, AKA Burns, as a toast to the Padre's pudding. Well, this is the kind of thing it is. Oh, you sweet enchanting thing, What promise does your presence bring? Upon the table bubbling there, you set the hair of one on fire who overreached his strong desire to lick you up and jump the queue to celebrate the zest in you. His spoon, see eager passion choose. Since noon he's been dabbling at the booze. He digs in with a gentle push and how your innards outward gush. Some are for nuts and some for flesh. All flail about and intersperse. New appetite with old tradition. It could be wobbly, it could be worse. The purist has his piece of cheese. This curd of choice will never please. Or maybe a slice of melon. His girth, it never will be swelling. But mark the pudding of the race, a splash of sweetness on his face. Even though the night is cold, their bellies layered, broad and bold, fit to swagger to the car or linger for a fine cigar. Ye powers beyond our cynicism, who fashion sugar and fermentation, as the days are turning cold and salads are no longer sold, we soldiers want no wilting lettuce creeping through dressing like a trap to get us. But if you would our grateful cheer, gie us our pudding with our beer. Well, that's something that we could do. We already know how to have fun. In his foreword to Colonel Harper's book, The Fraser Highlanders, Brigadier the Right Honourable Lord Lovett, the 24th Chief of Clan Fraser, wrote, "The Frasers, whoever they may be, are still a united family and a proud one at that. Touch one and you touch them all. A cup of water as reward shared around." Brigadier Lord Lovett was also wounded in battle in World War II. As he was carried from the field, he said, "I have become a casualty, but I can rely on you not to take one step back. You are making history." We are history in Canada, and we are making history in Canada. This is our chapter to be written in the great saga of the 78 Fraser Highland Regiment. I wish you well. I wish you encouragement. Stay safe, stay brave, be proud. Thank you.
Applaud, but I would ask Peter to thank you for these wonderful words. Peter?
Here I am. Well, Padre, you and I have had quite a few little discussions about our different denomination, but there's one thing that ties us all together. That's the love of our regiment. For those of us with belief in our Lord, in these very difficult times where it isn't only necessarily a question of physical discomforts or difficulties, but also the mental aspects in our minds. And just listening to you today made me smile, made me very pensive. You've all obviously put a lot of work into this presentation that you've given us. So thank you on behalf of all of us, and God bless everybody. And stay strong.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Peter. And Malcolm, I can only reiterate, that was an amazing presentation. Are you available for comments? And if we're going to comments, will have to be that you will unmute yourself, wave first, that you want to say something, unmute yourself, and then I'll tell you, I'll suggest when you can take over. I do not have everyone on the screen at the same time. So we will start with the Reverend Catherine Burgess from the St. Andrew's Garrison in Quebec City, the Padre there. Catherine?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much for inviting us. I was so pleased when I received the invitation from Alan. Padre, that was amazing. I would love to have a copy of your Padre's pudding, the Toast to the Padre's pudding. If you can write that down and send it to us, that would be so much appreciated. I know.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anyone else? Next. David Clark, unmute yourself.
I think I'm unmuted now. It's such a honored to have Malcolm as our Padre in York, and we're truly blessed to have someone like that lead us. And not only is he extremely talented and of good nature, but he's also amazingly obedient. He practically read that word for word from the way I wrote it. Thank you very much.
That was our secret, David.
Next will be Robbie Spruels.
Thank you, sir. Padre, what an excellent delivery. I presume that you've had a lot of time to be practicing your marching and your 8-point salute there in the quiet of Prince Edward County. So we'll be looking towards getting you your gorget very soon. And I hope I'm the one that can help our Captain of the Honorable Guard test you. It would be my great pleasure, sir. And just for the rest of you, an interesting project that the Padre and I have been doing during COVID, and some of you might wish to try this. I started off by writing a story for Malcolm. And I wrote a chapter of this story and then sent it to Malcolm. And at that point, it was up to Malcolm to write the next chapter, which he did. And it was about the battle for Quebec. Although it had very little to do with my first chapter, there were links to it. And then he sent it back to me. I wrote the next chapter, and I believe he is in the process of writing the next chapter now. I'm looking forward to it, sir, because I need something to read. It's something that during lockdown, all of you might try with 1 or 2 other people to keep you occupied during this time. But sir, thank you for that delivery. It was wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Paul Goodman, Honorary Lieutenant Colonel in the Fort St. Helen Garrison.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm unmuted. Bruce, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Padre, inspirational and charming, and I am privileged. I have been privileged to hear you twice now. Your amazing presentation at the late Commanders Conference in Toronto was, I'll tell you, it was so moving. I was in tears. Thank you very much for your guidance and spiritual direction. Most appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
And Paul always looks amazing when his hairdo is done in the 18th century style. Anybody else have comments? Louise and Ted Gunn from Quebec City.
Great to see you again, Padre. We first met in Scotland in 2015
Yes.
at the
Yes, we
Glengarry
did.
Highland Games.
Yes, sir.
Or not the Glengarry, the Halkirk Highland Games.
Yes, Alkirk.
And then we met again here in Quebec City at Chalmers Wesley United Church. So it's great to see you again. Thank you very much for speaking to all of us, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
We met on the at Halkirk, a small town in the north of Scotland, at a games, and I didn't know who Ted was. And I happened to say to him, "I'm a 78th Fraser Highlander," and he said, "I'm a 78th Fraser Highlander." Well, we created a crowd. In about 2 minutes, I think they thought we were going to take each other on with swords and spontoons, but we became friends. And when I went to Quebec City to preach as a guest, Ted was my watcher and my keeper, and I've always been very grateful for that. Thank you.
Well, it was good. I have a connection to the Fraser Highlanders. My grandmother Gunn in Scotland was a Fraser, and an ancestor of hers was the Captain Alexander Fraser of Godottle, who fought with General Wolfe in the Battle of Quebec and led the Grenadiers to the Battle of St. Foy, where he was wounded and recovered, fortunately, and returned to Scotland.
That's neat.
Ted, I think you're probably the oldest member on the conference today, and you're as spry as ever. How old are you now?
87.
For you.
And Ted
Still going a bit slower than normal, I must say, but still in there.
yeah,
Thanks to my lady Louise beside me here.
To see you all.
Great to see you. Louise, you're looking very well.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
okay. Is there anyone else? I have a few questions to pose at the end. Okay, I don't see anybody else. Rob from Winnipeg.
Thank you, sir. First off, Padre, wonderful words. I definitely will pass it on to the garrison here in Winnipeg, and just wanted to send greetings to everybody and hope that everybody is doing well, staying safe with the situation with COVID. And just to let everybody know that it has not started snowing yet in Winnipeg. So anybody who's worried about visiting, we're still good for at least another 2 weeks. So if you care to visit, you're fine. You don't have to bring a parka yet. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Rob.
We do actually have representation from what I can see from basically all of the garrisons across Canada. So thank you. And this brings us to the next point, which is, they could never have imagined what Zoom was in the 18th century. But we have the opportunity of using this, especially during these COVID times. If we were to organize one of these events once a month, once every 2 months, and I'm thinking about having a session, for example, on history, where Major Earl Chapman, who is also on the line tonight, might give another few minutes on some points of regimental history. Is this the kind of thing that you'd be interested in?
Very much so.
Yes.
Okay, we'll definitely keep that in mind and see what we can do. I have been recording this. Our aim is to put it on the headquarters website for anyone to watch it later. And I think that's about it. Any final comments? Earl?
Just to mention, some years back, I worked on the letters of the original regiment's Padre, Robert McPherson. And these are in a book form, transcribed and annotated. And Bruce has got, I believe, a fair number of copies. I think they're less than $20 a copy. But those that are interested to read the letters of the original Padre of the regiment, I'll just show what the book looks like. It's a nice little presentation. So you can contact Bruce if you want a copy. Thank you.
We have that one.
Yeah, and Malcolm, yours is in the mail. It's depending on it's depending on Canada Post and where you are. Who knows? Paul,
Could I just second Earl's suggestion? And could I mention, Padre St. Clair, that Padre McPherson's letters are extraordinary on many levels: historical level, personal level, psychological insight. They're extraordinary. He was an extraordinary man.
And
I'll
he
enjoy
was my
reading them.
predecessor here at St. Andrews in Quebec City.
Wow, that's so neat. That's neat.
okay. Well,
So I
then,
definitely want a copy of that book.
okay, Catherine, I'll send one to you.
Great.
That being the case,
I think Charles wants to say a few words.
pardon?
Charles Hill has put his hand up.
Charles, you're not on my screen. Talk. It's yours, Charles.
Unmute yourself. Charles, unmute yourself. Charles, unmute yourself. Nope.
Charles. Thing is, I don't see him on my screen. He has to be here somewhere. It might be me that,
I see him, but he's not, he's muted still.
Yeah, I
He's
see
muted.
him. Can you
He's
unmute
muted.
mute people, Bruce?
yes, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go. He's still muted.
Unmuted.
The icon's still up.
Bruce, you should be able to unmute him.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. And the system is not responding.
Oh,
Charles, can you hear me?
His screen is actually frozen right
Okay,
now,
he's
so he
actually
may
frozen.
not be able to respond.
He's frozen right now.
It's a rare day that we would want to unmute Major Phil.
Yeah, Charles.
I think he heard that.
Charles, I think you're frozen. Oh, there you go. You're okay. You can also press the space bar.
There, can you hear me now?
Here you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, go.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On behalf, I just want to say that on behalf of all of York Garrison, both the officers and my ladies, we wish every single member of the regiment warm welcomes and stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon, if not over the period of time, over the next 12 months, certainly at the next Commanders Conference. But I just wanted to, on behalf of all of the garrison officers and my ladies, to wish every single one of the regiment best wishes. Thank you, sir.
It's much appreciated. Last call. Then thank you very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
bye, bye, bye,
Thank you, Malcolm.
bye. Thank you, Malcolm.
Welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Malcolm, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.